Excellent. So welcome, Rob.
Thank you. It's good to be here and see you guys.
Yeah. Shandeep, you know Rob, yeah? You guys know each other?
Yeah. We were together for a brief period of time before Rob had to leave, and then he came back.
Yeah.
That's right.
I don't even remember when that was.
Well, J4, you had to leave after you got bitten, and then you came back.
No, I know. I'm just thinking like all this, so much has happened since. It's sometimes it's interesting to reflect back and
how do you remember that time?
Do you want the context of it?
Yeah, I think it would help anybody who's listening to.
Okay. So jumping into probably what you asked earlier, the plant medicine. I went to Costa Rica on my own to a place called Soltara, and I signed up for 8 ayahuasca ceremonies it was supposed to happen within 2 weeks. And on the first night, I experienced something so intense and dark and real. It was extremely real. There was no kind of made up darkness in this ceremony. It floored me, it destroyed me. And I ended up bolting out of that retreat center without even saying anything. The next day, I just bailed because I couldn't handle it. And then having calmed down, I reflected on the fact that I went there to face this darkness, to work through all that stuff. And so I ended up going back for the second half of the last 4 ceremonies. And they continued to just tear me apart and just level me to nothing. And out of desperation, I signed up for the One Heart journeys, which were shortly after that event. And by that time, my body and my mind and my meat vehicle was just not in great shape. I was not sleeping well. And my immune system just went out, and having gotten a couple of insect bites, I ended up getting infected. And it was just, it's, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place because I've been thinking about this.
It's all good.
For a while. Yeah, but then kind of fast forwarding beyond that, so I got my legs infected. I had to get like some mild operations to remove all the pus and stuff. But reflecting after having gone through all of that, I realized that was exactly what I needed to experience, because I was living a bit of a lie. I was deceiving myself that I was being true to myself. I got sucked into the world of social media, of fame, and I was living a life not for myself, but one for others. I got caught in the game of this role playing, of projecting a life of success out to the world through digital media, in that process, I lost kind of the connection with myself, and I started living and embodying this Rob that people saw, and I try to feed that image. And so that whole process kind of disintegrated that for me, that need, let's call it, for that kind of attention. So that's why I feel it was the best thing that could happen to me. And right now I'm in the process of kind of distancing myself from that whole world of, this digital persona. Because I realized when you're trying to please others and impress others, you're not living your own life. You're living under the terms of others and what you think their expectations are. And it's a bizarre process because it gets so multifaceted. You just get lost in it. I'm going to pause for now so you guys can maybe say something about that.
I think what would help is maybe some context on who Rob Gryn is. So maybe
right.
could you give a 20-second, 30-second view of you?
Yeah. Sorry, I've embodied the just I am, full stop. But yeah, over the past 8 years, I've been on an entrepreneurial journey, building a company out of Poland. and I kind of isolated myself from the whole world. I was self-funded, so I just bunkered down and started building this company because I told myself as a kid that I would show everybody my worth through achieving great success. And I just went into this drive to build the most successful business I could possibly build. Ended up putting me on the cover of Forbes magazine in Poland. And that's when, that was not that long ago, it was less than 3 years ago. And that's when I kind of came into the spotlight, which I thought was my goal.
And what did it feel like to achieve the goal?
Yeah, well, I remember going to in the morning, going to the kiosk to buy that Forbes magazine where I was on the cover of it. And I saw it, saw my silly face on it. I'm like, what the fuck? I remember showing the cashier, I'm like, hey, look, it's me on the cover. And she's like, okay, beep. And so I went to the office. I felt like it was a bigger deal for everybody in my company, for my family, than it was for me. I thought it would change me, but it didn't. It was kind of this surreal experience where you start to observe how this world works, where before you were buying these magazines, seeing other people's faces on it. And now all of a sudden your face is on it. And you're like, hey, it's not that big a deal. Like, actually anyone can do these things that, you know, once I thought were completely out of reach. And so it starts to normalize all these previously perceived extraordinary things that surrounded me. You know, and it makes you really believe anything's possible in this world. I mean, anything is possible as long as you believe it's possible. So I guess that's the biggest takeaway from it.
Maybe Pablo, if you wanna, I don't know how much you've shared with Rob, but once again, for anybody who's watching and for Rob's benefit, do you want to talk about why we named this show Through the Fire and what it means to us and what we focus on?
Yeah, thank you, Shandeep. You know, Through the Fire is, you know, we're inviting guests, more importantly, friends and co-creators, individuals that we've genuinely have had relationship, friendship, collaborations, and we want to bring to the world what everyone has an opportunity in life to walk through the fire. Like if we haven't been there, I feel like we haven't lived hard enough. We haven't lived strong enough. And for those of us on this call, we had Danny Morell on the previous call and the previous talk and conversation. And we're just interested in just what is the story? What is everyone's success story, and what was that point of, you know, walking through the fire to make it to the success? And then once within the space of success and have this grand life that all of us have created, you know, there could be other areas where we get to walk through the fire again, right? And discover something new. It's like burning the old and rebirthing into the new light. And to give the viewers, our subscribers, just some context, Rob, you were Forbes magazine top 100 richest Poles list, right? And you were number 57.
Yeah.
And I Googled it, and it says that your net worth is 174 million USD, right? Some people can't fathom what that's like. And one thing that caught my attention is there's a quote: entrepreneurship is living a few years of your life like most people won't, so that you can spend the rest of your life like most people can't. And that's so profound, because that right there shows like this great spark of life, and this great spark of, like, you know, that lion's roar, like, I'm gonna get it and I'm gonna do whatever it takes. And then here you are sharing the story of you're buying the magazine, your picture's on it, and it's not that big of a deal for you, right? What was it like for you to get to that? You have something else I read is that you didn't have any like people in Poland that you would look up to, any individuals that you were like, okay, I want to do it like this guy did it. I need a mentor. I want a mentor. I want a coach. You didn't look up to anybody. And what did it take for you to say, I'm going to do this all on my own? And why?
Yeah, so I used to buy that same magazine. In the US, they have it as well, the 100 richest people of Forbes. It'd come out annually, and I'd always buy it, flipping the pages, hoping to find some young person who achieved, or just got on that list, just as a, to show me that it's possible in Poland, because it's never really been done. Poland's only been a free market economy for just over 30 years. So it's a bit of a fresh thing there. But there was never any sort of success story that was publicly known. And when I was starting out, I thought I was insane for trying to build something in a country that honestly felt like it was designed to dismantle entrepreneurship rather than facilitate it. There's all this bullshit and bureaucracy around building a company that was extremely just hindering to any progress. So, I'm saying that because practically not one day went by when I didn't think about quitting, where I thought, this is ridiculous what I'm doing. And I don't know what fueled me. I believe it's my insecurities that I needed to prove to the world that I'm worth something, because I always believed I was a loser, that I was a lazy piece of shit. That was my kind of inner dialogue. And I used that insecurity as this unstoppable fire to just keep me going through the toughest moments. At the same time, there was a level of confidence where I'm going to make a distinction between confidence and self-esteem. Self-esteem was extremely low. Confidence was really quite high. Even though I didn't really know what I was doing. By definition, entrepreneurship is venturing into uncharted territory where nobody's been before. So you're just improvising. And reflecting today actually on something that, I always thought as a kid that adults knew what they were doing, that at school other kids and teachers knew what they're doing. I always felt like the odd one out. And I believe a lot of people go through this kind of process. I ended up realizing in my journey in business, where I first thought all my competitors knew what they were doing. I go to conferences, they bombard me with acronyms. I'm like, what are they talking about? I don't know anything. And then I realized nobody really knows what the hell they're doing. And that's the greatest advantage you could, I think, achieve in business and perhaps in life, is understanding that not only do you not know, but everybody else doesn't really know. And that you knowing that they don't know allows you to do things that before perhaps you wouldn't be bold enough to do. And that was kind of this trigger point in my life where I said, screw it. Like, nobody knows what the hell we're doing. Let's just keep going forward. And part of that process was also because there's no one to look up to. I kind of created my own universe in this office that I built with people I hired. And I didn't interact with anyone else except our business partners. And nobody knew that a company like ours even existed in Poland. It was like under the radar. It wasn't necessarily on purpose, but I just felt no need to brag about it or be public about it. Plus I'm an introvert, so I enjoy that kind of privacy. And then the Forbes story broke and everybody's like, who the hell is this guy? Where did he come from? And I was operating in my own bubble for 6 years, 5 years, just hustling and doing nothing else, just weekends working. It was my sole purpose in life, was attaining the success. Without, my goal was never get on this list of Forbes or in the cover of the magazine. That never even crossed my mind, to be honest. That just kind of unfolded on its own. So yeah, every day wanting to quit and somehow finding that energy within yourself to just keep going through that muck, through that uncertainty. And that's why in this situation now with the COVID virus, I don't feel very uneasy because it's completely uncertain. And that's kind of the way I've been operating for the past decade as an entrepreneur. So I feel very comfortable with uncertainty. It's kind of my norm. Just a little tangent there.
This is pretty sweet. This is I'm getting super excited just listening to you. So this is pretty sweet. First time I wanted to say that. One thing that you said earlier was you said a few times now, show everybody your worth, right? Yeah. And you said that when you were a kid, you wanted to show everybody your worth. Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you talk about where that came from as a kid?
Yeah. I suppose childhood trauma, which I learned that trauma isn't necessarily something what we think when we think the word trauma, that something extreme had to happen. But I felt like I was an invisible child, like I wasn't noticed, and nobody really cared about my opinion. And so perhaps that added to me being an introvert, but I just kind of hid away during my school years. I was a bit of a loner. I had a few friends, but I always knew I had something to show, but I was too scared to show it on kind of a daily basis. You know, if it was a minor example in class, if the teacher asked a question, I would know the answer. I'd be too afraid to even raise my hand to try to answer it, knowing I knew the answer, because I knew there was maybe a small chance I'd be wrong and I'd be humiliated. So I kind of lived in this fear-based world where on one side I knew I had a lot to show and offer. On the other side, fear would win pretty much all the time. Mm. And so after finishing my education, I went on to do my bachelor's in the UK and my master's in Scotland, namely to please my parents. After that, I felt somewhat liberated from that kind of system where I was graded and people told me what to do and how well I would do whatever they told me to do. I felt like I was now in an arena where I could create my own little cosmos where I could thrive in. And I always knew I wanted to have my own business. I never knew what that actually meant. I didn't even know what a company was. Like, it's not something they teach you, that legal entity. It's a very abstract concept for a young mind to wrap its head around. So I knew I wanted one. I didn't know what it was. And then at the age of 24, I set up my first sole proprietorship. And it kind of just took off from there because I realized business is a game. And I always was a gamer because I was a loner and an introvert. I would be very comfortable in front of my computer. And I play a lot of video games, like hardcore. I was one of the best players in Counter-Strike in Poland when I was a teenager. Yeah. So when I realized that an internet business is actually just the most to play in this world, I was like, oh my God, this is where I can really shine and not need to interact with people. I can just sit here and maybe hire some people. Oh, and speaking of hiring, there's a quick story, which is quite interesting. In my senior year, I was close to actually failing the year. I was a terrible student. And I was studying C++, a programming language, and I couldn't understand it. Like, I was just the worst programmer in the whole class. And you know, my business, I didn't mention, is IT based. And I had to, at the end, I had to hire from a newspaper ad a programmer to do my final project for me, for him to actually program it for me. So he'd come to my house once a week or twice a week. I'd pay him, I think it was $5 an hour. Back then it was maybe the equivalent of 20 now. And he'd write this code for me. And I'd be like, dude, what are you writing? Like, I don't think we learn this stuff. This is too advanced, make it a little worse. So I had to like engineer him to code my final project in C++, which was the course that could have, made me fail the whole grade. And I learned later that was my own experience with delegating work, that I don't have to know programming to program. You can learn to interact with another human being who's good at it and delegate that to him and pay him, reward him for his time. So at the age of 17, I learned that can be an alternative to not being that great at something, which is not something they teach you at school, you know? And so things started to kind of piece together. And that's how I ended up building a company that at one point had 250 people.
Wow. So, sorry, one of the interesting points that you made was you were afraid of showing your worth, even if you knew what it was, but there was a fear of showing that worth. But you went through the school system, and that liberated you from that. What did you mean by that? How did the school system look? That's the first time I'm hearing something positive about the school system.
Oh no, that's not at all what I meant. I meant after just completing it, getting the piece of paper, I was like, oh, I'm done with that.
Interesting.
And liberated, having finished that stage of my life, because my father dreamed of having one son who had a master's degree, so I did that. And then after having done that, I was like, okay, I'm done with this bullshit system. No more of that. So that's what I meant.
Rob, let me ask you, because it's interesting. Your first company's internet marketing, is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So you bring up how you are an introvert, and then there's internet marketing, which is kind of like the opposite of being an introvert, because it's about grabbing something and putting it out there, and then expressing your experience in high school of hiring someone to finish your coding project. It sounds like that's like kind of like your superhero talent, right? Where you know how to take something and turn it to gold, even though you may not be the person that's in front of it, right? And then you end up in the position years later as the person in front of the magazine, right? And it's almost like you're disrupting the game of how successful business is supposed to be, right? And I know, I've known you for a while, and I know you as what I feel from you, what I get from you is like this quirky, like funny, playful dude, right? And not taking shit serious at all. Like, and I feel like that's the Rob I know. And then I can only like help me like unpack this as a young 17 to 25-year-old, really, when you became, that was the peak between, graduating and 25, when you make it large. What part of you did you have to like set aside that is you at the core to then become something that the world is expecting from you? Because I don't think you're an introvert. I don't think you're an introvert, bro. I think you're like super open, super transparent. You kind of put that aside sometimes, right?
Yeah, I definitely. Let's do one clarification. The peak was 29, 30, so not that long ago, 3 years ago. Yeah, no worries. But so there was a point in high school when I felt such extreme social anxiety in any engagement with another human being that I realized that, I was quite honest with myself. I'm like, there's something wrong with me. This is not normal, and I got to work on this. And the only way to work on this is to force yourself to be in more of these situations rather than to continuously avoid them, sitting in front of your computer, being comfortable. So I believe I created a part of me that is now comfortable being around people, even though I still get anxious in social situations, but it's a normal feeling for me rather than something that's debilitating. I still feel awkward oftentimes. I still have a lot of the traits, but I've learned how to just kind of observe them rather than embody them and let them kind of cripple me as they used to. So I guess that's the biggest thing. And, just building the business, having to interact with people, that was more of like a family environment. So I suppose that didn't happen so much there, but situations where I started, say, post this Forbes event, I started doing more interviews, giving like some sort of public appearances. That was something that till this day is quite difficult for me, and I still avoid that. Say like giving a talk in front of a few hundred people. That's something that still, I can't really handle that. And I know I should probably approach it the same way I did my previous social anxieties, by plowing into that. But I'm at a point where I don't know if that's the path I want to keep taking, that the struggle is the way. That was something I convinced myself of, that life is supposed to be brutal, and every day it's a battle against yourself. That I embodied for the decade or the 8 years that I was building the business. Every single day, I wanted to give up. I didn't feel like doing most of the things I did, but I did them anyway. And I'm at a point now where I'm like, is that really the way I want to live the rest of my life? I don't think so. So it's a game I played, and now I kind of observe the success and this character of Rob. I'm like, who the hell was that guy? Is that even me? It's bizarre. It's like, even when you asked me to introduce myself, I'm like, what? Oh, okay, that guy, right?
That guy.
The old Rob, that entrepreneur Rob character. So yeah, I feel like you create this kind of persona that doesn't necessarily mean that's not you, but it's just you that you feel fits in a given time, in a given role, in a given mission, given project you're working on. That character kind of set will best allow you to achieve what you want to achieve. And I no longer need that guy. So Pablo, the version you met of me, that was a year and a half ago, almost now. That was already me having stepped away from the company. I couldn't handle being at the head, as a CEO role, and I stepped aside, and that was one of my goals. And I just kind of took a passive role, which has been the case for, almost a year and a half, where I've just not involved anymore in the company. And that process was actually probably the most difficult thing I've done in my life, because it was coupled with an existential and identity crisis. As soon as I officially gave it, I said, I'm stepping aside, here's our new CEO. And then I went off on my own. I'm like, oh my God, who am I? Like, I never thought about that. I became so entangled with this CEO founder persona that I had created, that when I stepped aside from that, I felt an utter void. Like I was nobody. And it was extremely, extremely difficult to work through that on my own. And that's actually when I remember I was sitting in our little WeWork office in Santa Monica, where I really wasn't doing anything productive. I was like, God damn, I have to do something. And having done, having done 2 ceremonies of ayahuasca 2 years before that in Peru, I'm like, maybe it's time to revisit plant medicine. And I spent 3 days researching online what would be the best sort of environment to do that in. And that's when I stumbled upon One Heart. And that's how I ended up there for the New Year's ceremony.
It's just an incredible story.
Yeah.
Can you talked about it being the hardest thing you've done in your life. Can you talk about why it was so hard, and in now that you've had time to reflect upon it and do ceremonies and think about that, what allowed you to do it in the way that you did it? And if you could go back, would you do it differently, and how would that differ?
When you say do it differently, which part do you mean? All of it?
Yeah, like do the departure part, just that part that was the hard thing that you've said that has happened in your life. How would you do it differently, being the person who you are now? But first, what was that like for you, and what allowed you to do that?
Well, as we all know, as soon as you go to school, people are asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? All of that. What do you do is often the first thing a stranger will ask you. So we define ourselves with our career, with what we do, with our wealth, with our success. And that's what I was led to believe, that's what defines someone's worth, is their level of success, how hard they battle through life, how hardy they can get to never give up and just keep going. And I was fully bought into that, and I believed I'd continue on that path to the end of my life, to become a billionaire. This abstract goal to build the unicorn, a company valued at $1 billion. I just kind of hung that out on a rod in front of me so I could perpetually chase that. And I knew I was deceiving myself. There's some part of me that's like, Rob, what are you talking about? What are you doing? Okay, let's ignore that. Let's not question that. Let's just get back to work and build this mystical unicorn. And then at some point I started to kind of crumble. I was like, what? Like burnout, just from the grind, just from sitting in front of the computer, just from seeing the money on the screens, because it's another abstraction. All this money is all just these numbers on a screen, right? Like, what the hell does that even mean? I'm sure if there was like gold in the office equivalent to the money that was going through our company, you'd act differently. But it's just an abstract thing to build a fully digital company where you never see the physical money. Anyway, so I really, although I didn't identify myself with this Forbes thing, this one of the richest, youngest people in Poland, everybody else did. Like that day that I was on that magazine cover, I got like thousands of emails and messages from young people just saying thank you, mostly thanking me for being the guy that I used to look for in the magazine, the proof that it's possible. So that's when I realized, like, I feel some sort of like responsibility. Obviously there's ego involved in that, responsibility to kind of live a little bit more publicly, to share this story so maybe other people can enjoy a similar path. Maybe enjoy is the wrong word, but be motivated to take that difficult, path of most resistance journey type of thing. But I was so bought into this whole career that I'm this founder. My parents were proud, their friends were jealous, all of these things. And then all of a sudden you step aside from all of that. And I thought that's all that I am, is this founder guy. And as soon as you step aside from that, you realize why many people never retire in their life, because it just leaves this big blank slate of like, who the hell am I if not my job and my career and what I do? Like, nobody teaches you to deal with that. So when you kind of find yourself in that position at the age of, I was 30 years old, it was scary. There was a part of me that's like, let's get back into it. I made a mistake. Let's start building something new. You're pulled back to the familiar, to that grind, to that matrix, to that game, because that's all you know. That's all you ever grew up knowing. And so to kind of start asking these questions and to go, I guess in the short, it's trying your best to become someone and then figuring out how to be okay being no one. And that's kind of the process I went through, is now I've become comfortable being nobody. I really don't enjoy telling anyone what I do or did. It makes me feel uneasy, actually, as though I'm projecting again. So I usually don't even mention.
So Rob, let's go back to that though. I'm very curious about that. Like you talking about just leaving something you've been growing as a baby, right? And entrepreneurship is a baby, right? Like your company, you do everything you can every single day to make sure that baby doesn't die. And I'm in that position, right? I'm an entrepreneur right now. It's my second year in my company as a CEO, and I'm there. Like this is what I'm doing. Stepping away I can't even imagine that right now, right? And but there's a lot of people that are in the position that you were in, where you're like, I need to step away, but I can't because this is familiar. This is my baby. It can sustain itself now. It doesn't need me. So what did it take for you to make that call and step away?
So funnily enough, 2 years before that, around 4 years from now, my then business partner, he was away for a month in Japan for his first holiday in 4 years. And during his month away, I firmly decided that as soon as he gets back, I'm telling him that I'm out. It was a peak of our financial success. We're making insane amounts of profit. And at the same time, I had never been more burnt out. And I decided as soon as he comes back, I'm going to sit down with him and tell him I'm out. We either sell the company together or figure something else out. And then the day he got back, he messages me that, hey, Rob, we need to meet outside of the office. I'm like, oh, shit. You get that weird feeling like, something's going to happen. And he says the exact same thing that I wanted to tell him. He says that to me. He says, I am done with the business and you're not going to change my mind. Either you buy me out in the next few months or I stay on till we sell the company together. And that was a point where I would say we're closest to this Forbes valuation. We could have hypothetically sold for, say, $100 million plus at that point. Insane growth, highly profitable, no investors from the outside. And we negotiated for a while, and I was about to agree to sell the business with him. And then at the last moment, something inside of me said, no, hold on. I always thought he did most of the work and that I was not really needed in the company. And something in my ego, again, in my insecurity was like, oh, hold on. I want to see if I can pull the weight all on my own. So I ended up buying him out and continuing on my own. And that's something that till this day, sometimes at night, I think about, why the fuck did you extend? And yeah, that's been a difficult one to fully swallow. And so, yeah, I decided to stay on my own. And that's what led to my total burnout, because being at it on your own without having someone to rebound anything off of, that's really tough. So I don't know if you have a business partner or not, but you do. Yeah, that's the way forward. Yeah. Sorry, what was I strayed away from your question?
I think you've answered the question. I think it sounds like you just got to a point where you were burned out so much that it sounds like even if the act of stepping away was hard anyway, maybe it was, and you can validate this, maybe it sounds like it was made harder because of how burned out you were at that point.
Yeah, and plus the industry I was in is advertising technology. You know, at the end of the day, you're just facilitating people selling stuff to people that they don't need. It's perpetuating this consumerism definitely with advanced technology. So I didn't feel good with that at the time. At the beginning, I didn't give a shit, frankly. I was like, money is money. I'll do whatever it takes. And then with time, you're like, what kind of world do I want to live in? How do I want to contribute to this? And so I guess tied into that was just the industry that I chose to begin with, not entirely fulfilling. And yeah, perhaps if I ever went back to the Matrix to build something again, it'd have to be something completely different.
You know, Rob, what if, well, I mean, you've shared so many important points that it's like, I wish I can capture it and be like, let's talk about that. And there's so much juicy information, and I appreciate your vulnerability and your transparency and your sharing, because, you know, it's really the vulnerability and sharing from this genuine place of truth that sometimes successful people kind of hide, you know, behind the CEO persona and the founder persona and the entrepreneur startup persona and the high-level executive persona, you know, this confidence, but also the blur lines of like, I got this shit figured out, I got it under control. And you just completely opened up, you know, to obviously to us and our subscribers, our viewers, that that attitude and that way of doing business got you to a place where you burnt out and you're like, done. Now, you live a life that you can do anything and have anything you want at any time, right? And because you've acquired a certain level of, you know, financial success, financial freedom, is it worth it? The amount of struggle, the amount of suffering, the amount of sleepless nights and identity crisis and battle, is it worth it? Was it worth it for you? Not is it worth it for somebody out there, because everybody does it differently. Was it worth it for you?
In short, yes. Had I not taken this path of greater resistance, who knows who I'd be today. Do I regret some things? Yeah, I would have done them differently, but you know, you try not to fixate on that. I could have very well ended up in a corporate job, as my father was always pushing me in that direction. I'm so grateful I managed to break through the greatest obstacle for me, which was the discouragement of my father from taking the entrepreneurial sort of journey. So I absolutely, yeah, I'm very grateful I managed to do what I did, because it's in the most difficult moments in life, that's when you learn who you really are, regardless of what the situation or the context is. When you're in a situation where you don't know what to do, you want to give up, you want to run away, and you end up showing yourself that you won't make that decision, the easy decision, you keep going forward, it really builds a character. And like you said, you can get lost in this whole game of pretending to always know what's up, what's happening. That's kind of the role of the CEO, is kind of giving this image to everybody around that everything's under control, even though most of the time you're in your head, you're like, fuck, I have no idea what's going on. It's this total imposter syndrome. A lot of entrepreneurs struggle with this thing called imposter syndrome, where you're kind of just waiting for everybody to figure out that you really don't know what the fuck you're doing. But then with time, just kind of you get accustomed to that, but that's just the way it is. Like, I am an imposter because I'm just legging it. Just like in life, anything you do, you can just, yeah, you know, it's applicable to everything now. And now I guess I'm at a point in my life, what you said, you know, comes with the paradox of choice, when you've kind of liberated yourself financially and otherwise to do anything in the world, you kind of get paralyzed at the same time, because there's quite literally, you can do anything. And at the same time, you're like, what do I do now? So it's a process. Keith Rossi said you should be spelunking into different areas of life and just kind of figuring out what will work for you next. And that's kind of what I've been doing. I launched a podcast at the end of last year just to further kind of come out of my comfort zone and broadcast myself to hundreds of thousands of people in Poland. I've done some other things as well. And I guess that's the process now of just trying and figuring out what I want to stick with for the next years.
Yeah. And let's touch a little bit about on that portion of you're burnt out. There's a point right before you start going into the discovery and the research about ayahuasca and plant medicine. What led you to that initial search? What was it that you were asking yourself that you said, okay, I need something else to find something? And why ayahuasca?
So the journey, entrepreneurship in general is quite a lonely process, a journey where ultimately you're battling yourself. It's the only limiting factor in that game is you. And with that comes a lot of loneliness that gives you a lot of time to reflect and think about things. And in those years of building the business, after I'd go home, I'd feel this emptiness. Like there has to be more to life than just being excited to go work and make more money to try to show everybody how much you're worth. So I always was like seeking for something, but I didn't know what. And then I started reading. I started with reading Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, then his Tools of the Titans, where ayahuasca was mentioned a few times, and plant medicine in general. And that sparked my interest. And before that, I'd never tried any psychedelics of any sort. So I didn't really know what it was talking about. And then there was a point where I was really struggling with insomnia, like a year of barely sleeping. And funnily enough, at 4 a.m., I just couldn't sleep. I turned on my laptop and I just randomly put in LinkedIn. And Tim Ferriss's blog post about ayahuasca pops up at the top of LinkedIn, of all places. And I ended up booking a retreat in Peru that same night, not knowing what the hell I was getting into. And that's honestly, I did no research, no reading about ayahuasca other than what I saw in like snippets of his posts and books. And so I went with a completely open mind because I didn't have any expectations because I couldn't. And that first journey, I don't think I'll ever top that. I don't think I ever want to. It was absolutely insane. I guess that's what led to me parting ways with the Matrix world. So that was that first step where I jumped into the unknown, skipping all other psychedelics straight to ayahuasca.
What, you're saying something, it's almost like if I was watching and I was intrigued about ayahuasca, you make it sound a little scary, that first journey. It's funny because, and it's great that we get to introduce different dynamic expressions of the plant medicine and the different practices of breakthrough and different practices of consciousness that give our guests a viewpoint and different pathways, different possibilities that we can explore. So Danny, on our previous conversation, he was like glorifying ayahuasca. He's like loving it. Amazing experience. And yours is like, yes, amazing, strong, but it's like, oh boy, I don't know if I want to go there again, right? So what was it about? I mean, you don't have to go so detailed in the visions or your experience, just generally, what was it about that first experience that it was like, it sounds like it was too much all at once?
Well, the very first time in Peru it was pure bliss. For the first time I experienced that there's more to the world than what I've observed for the 30 years prior to having done that journey. For the first time, I felt that ultimately with the earth and everything and everyone in it. You know, I had heard about these things and I always kind of categorized them as some sort of hippie-like thinking. And having experienced that, I understood all of these people that I had seen throughout my life who were, you know, abstaining from diving into the world of the matrix and kind of going in the direction of nature, which always had a pull to me. But to experience that and embody it and lose yourself, lose your ego, and realize there's so much more to life than we are taught and what we see, it shattered this illusion that business and that form of success is the way forward for me. And that's when things started to kind of crumble. And you know, mentioning Danny, I personally am a little bewildered on how people can do multiple ayahuasca ceremonies and then go back to their business or their jobs and everything. I was unable to function the way I used to. Like, there's no way going back. At least that's what I experienced. And so for the years that followed that, I was kind of just bumbling about the office, no longer driven because that drive kind of precipitated. And but I didn't know what to do other than what I was familiar with. So that's why I say be wary, because it very well may change everything for you. You very well may go home and you will be unable to continue as you did before, because things are no longer the same. And you know it because the experience of ayahuasca is more real than what you experience on a kind of conscious, sober level.
Rob, I got a question. So you know, we talk about, and this is the first thing you mentioned when you got on the show, was you were projecting out a version of yourself that's disintegrated now. And it seems like that what disintegrated with that version was also this drive that you carried with you. But this drive at the same time was filled with insecurities, as you've also mentioned, right? So can you talk a little bit about who was it that disintegrated, right? And what part of you was it that disintegrated?
It was a part of me that didn't necessarily love myself and could only feed off of external validation, which was a never-ending process. You couldn't just get one dose of validation, say a Forbes event or whatever. It was never-ending. You would continuously look for more spotlight, more opportunities to kind of show what you've done. And I started to think, like, maybe that's how celebrities feel. That's why they go batshit crazy when they no longer receive the attention they got used to, because it's a very difficult thing to all of a sudden be flooded with all this praise, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people like personally thanking you. And then it dies off like everything in life. Nothing gold can stay, and it goes back to normal and people forget about you. And you're like, whoa, I need more of that. So you get caught up in this trap, and I guess that's what's dissolved. And I almost have an aversion to anything that I used to do. Like the podcast that I did myself, I like that kind of format because it's just you talk like what we're doing right now. It's just talk. It's fun, and you record it, and maybe you can help someone with that. And that's kind of the end goal of it. But any other actions on social media, trying to edit your life and making it look better, making you seem wealthier, that's a really dark path to take, and it can become addictive and dangerous. So I guess that's what I feel I've shed, the need for validation. I don't don't need it anymore. I don't believe.
When you went back to work after, and it was a different world for that 2 years, it sounds like 2 years, right? What were you able to find about yourself in those 2 years with you at work? Were you able to see anything that would lead you to a more, I don't know, quote unquote, better version of Rob?
Yeah. So I would say the effects of my first experience with ayahuasca lasted around half a year. There was no talk of integration or anything like that. I had no idea about that. However, for half a year, people noticeably, they saw a different Rob. And they were like, I don't know what the hell you did in Peru, but I'm glad you did it. So it gave me an insight into this real version of me that could potentially be me nonstop, without the insecurities, without the inner dialogue, without that inner critic, the voice questioning everything before you actually do it or say it. That kind of switched off or went into like hibernation. So I went more out of my head and just more into my heart. It just started to flow more, started to be kinder, started to be more considerate, less selfish. And so I think that's the biggest thing. It really shows you who you can be without the negative parts of the ego that can make you act in ways that are less than good.
Nice. So in connection with the current realities some of us are experiencing in the world, when we were going to schedule, initially about 2 weeks ago, you said that you got the COVID.
I mean, I had something, and I presume it was the COVID. I was at a few airports trying to make my way home, which didn't pan out, and I ended up here in Mexico, where I'm right now. Yeah, I was just exposed to many people, so I presumed a week later I was sick, that it was COVID, but who knows without testing. Cool.
And what are your feelings about this situation, from you as an individual personally, you as a successful businessman, as a mentor? Just what is your take on the current situation at a macro level, at a small level within your field, and at a global level?
Well, I firmly believe that something of great magnitude would happen within my lifetime, be it, not to be a doomsayer, but be it war or some sort of pandemic or some sort of global event, because of our connected world and the way it functions. It's completely unsustainable. Something had to give at some point. I feel like it was something that was going to happen at some point or another. And the problem, I believe the real problem, is not the virus itself, but the world and the system that we had allowed to come to be. It's not a good one. I don't feel it's a good one in many ways. Having been in this game of making money and having kind of had a glimpse into the world where the sums are in the hundreds of millions, sometimes working with companies that are doing billions of dollars of revenue. It's a very abstract kind of the 1% of the 1% part of the world where the people are playing a game. Like the way the people think, and the way that I thought when I was at kind of the peak of my, I'll call it greed and insatiable kind of lust for success. There was nothing that would stop me. So I can only think about what, say, the CEOs of fossil fuel companies and banks, how they must operate. They're probably even more driven than I was. And it scares me to think that, because I knew I was unstoppable, but I knew at the same time that I think I have I was raised well and I have a good heart and some sort of moral compass. But if you don't have those and you're driven even more than I was, it scares me to think what those people are capable of doing, the decisions that they're making in their boardrooms. It's quite terrifying, frankly, and that's why I'm not surprised the world looks the way it does, because when you get people like that that are not necessarily evil, but just so driven and kind of driven by that money, they will do anything to achieve their goals, pillaging the environment, you know, neglecting negative externalities of their operations and all this kind of stuff. So I feel it's inevitable, because we live on a finite planet, and we live as though, you know, we have a second planet B to go to as soon as we exhaust all the resources here. That's how we're acting. So this virus, I believe, I hope it's a wake-up call for people that it cannot continue this way. And granted, this is a virus that triggered a hyper crisis. Quite possibly it'll be greater than the Great Depression, so the greatest crisis we've seen in a century. Nobody really knows how this will unfold, but I need to think that good will come out of it, permanent change, because the virus itself wasn't the problem. It was the world we were living, the way we were living was the problem. You know, in this comfortable way. And I love this analogy, which was in the Sapiens book, I believe, or no, another book. Never mind the book title, but it was, imagine a thought experiment where you say murder is the worst possible thing that can happen in society we live in now. If you somehow remove the element of possibility or element of murder, then the next worst thing will be equally perceived as murder. And we've come to a point where life is so comfortable for many of us, not all of us, of course, that we perceive things as though they are murder. And that's why we get this whole political correctness movement, where people get offended by things that seemingly shouldn't touch them, but they take them so personally as though it was an attack on them. So when you remove violence and evil and you kind of create the new worst thing, it creates a world where it's dysfunction, I believe. And that's why we see the rise of populism. Personally, being from Poland, I'm observing as our authoritarian governments trying to take, you know, control of our country, which is worrisome. But I like to believe that a better world will come out of this, and be it a year or 2 or 3. I'm not smart enough to understand the implications of a global hyper crisis. I'm not even going to pretend. But kind of relieved, you know, kind of relieved. And I don't mean to belittle anyone's suffering. I know millions of people are losing their livelihoods, what they've worked for their whole lives. I cannot imagine what that must be like. But something had to give, and hopefully this is that trigger that will lead us in a better direction.
What would you say to somebody who is, let's say you're back running your company or beginning of a company, like, you know, all the stages? Is there a piece of advice or a piece of reflection that you would offer, or invitation you would offer to those people that are starting their journeys or beginning a company or middle of a company or end of a company? Is there some advice that you can give to those people?
Honestly, ask yourself why you're doing it. And if your answer is for the money, ask yourself again, why? How much money do you need? Is it like me? Is it to prove to others your worth? Or do you actually genuinely have a plan, say make $1 million and then do this or that? I believe most entrepreneurs kind of go blindly into it, not knowing why they're necessarily doing whatever they're doing. And think about if you're doing it to exit, or you're doing it as a kind of a lifestyle where it's something you want to pursue till the end of your life. A friend of mine who's a quantum physicist, he said, Rob, it's not too late. Dive into the sciences. Find something that you love in the sciences, and you'll be able to pursue that till the day you die, because it's kind of a never-ending pursuit in science. It's like that's the beauty of being a scientist, is that you do what you truly love, and you never get to the end of it. And when it's just money, at some point you will burn out, or you will sell successfully, or you'll fail and bankrupt, and you won't you won't have an answer for what next. So think a step ahead and know that it's a journey and it's not a destination. Say you want to make $1 million, you make that. It's a weird place to get to. I remember I made my first million when I was 24, 25. And I was like, what now? It's just, I thought like fireworks would go off and life would magically fix itself. Like we create these illusions, we cast these illusions in the future so we don't have to worry about the present. And I think that's the greatest, that's the biggest mistake most people do, is casting this fictitious event in the future and pursuing it relentlessly, convinced that reaching that point will fix all of their problems. And then you reach it and nothing changes because that's not the problem. The problem is kind of taking a moment of stillness and thinking about what it is that you want to embody. Like what it is that you want to, what kind of impact do you want to have in the world? It's those types of questions. And we don't ask those as entrepreneurs typically.
You know, Rob, you said something about fireworks when you reached that million. I remember when I was working in law and making pretty decent money. And my fireworks were like, you know, and when you get the VIP tables and they bring the champagne across the dance floor with the sparkly lights, and that was our table. And growing up in Miami, 30, you know, late 20s, early 30s, and having money. And Miami's a great place to have money, right? So having things that are just fun to have, and partying and bullshitting and wasting weekends and nights away. You know, a lot of, you know, we see the glamour and all these things because it's, you know, now with social media, like you said something about like looking as if you have more than what you have, right? And then, you know, what the amount of maintenance that it takes to maintain that attitude and that persona. And then here we are years later, like, let's ask ourselves, who am I, right? You know what I'm saying? So I love the contrast. I love it because it's raw, it's real. And there's a lot of people watching this from so many positions of life, like the hungry, young, I want to make my first million by the time I'm 25. I got to do it. And then now it's like the one that I already got my first million. I'm into my third, my fourth, and fifth. And now I'm asking, what's next, right? So there's these like different stages of fire and ritual and ceremony happening in life. Let me ask you, knowing what you know now and having experienced what you've experienced as a person, as a friend, as a son, as a CEO, as a founder, as a successful businessman, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Farmer.
Farmer.
Yeah, I was actually talking with my girlfriend what kind of animals we want to have on our farm. No, I'm not kidding. Like,
no, you're not.
I recently procured some land in the north of Poland on a lake, 40 hectares, so quite a sizable plot. I'm thinking of, if I am going to get back to the business, maybe it might be the CBD space, while having some chickens and goats and whatever on my farm. That kind of life, the just getting back in touch with nature, kind of the basic life, disconnecting and working on a daily basis to upkeep your surroundings, you know what I mean? Rather than just kind of making money and paying others to do the things that allow you to live, be it, you know, having your own supply of food or your own supply of water. It's kind of basics. And this Corona situation really makes you think, like, where do I want to be next time there's a lockdown? I want to be on my fucking farm with my goats.
That's where Pablo is.
Yeah.
Where Pablo is, yeah. Like, I want to be in a place where you don't really notice anything's happening, because I think that's the way it should be. You shouldn't be paralyzed by this. So yeah, I would say that.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for your time, man.
My pleasure, man. Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Really good share. I really appreciate your honesty. You know, I got a chance and a blessing to meet you in different moments of your life, and your really high highs and some like introverted spaces where we got to share some time together, some really quality, you know, brother to brother, confidant to confidant times. And it's always a pleasure to experience another man break, because I break. We all break at some point, and it's an opportunity for us to tell the world like it's okay to break and continue from this point. And it's okay that it doesn't feel good to be in this body, in this mind, and it sometimes feels alone and inadequate, and sometimes I don't know what to say. Sometimes I feel socially awkward. So I have to create this weird character that it's like, okay, that's the weird one. So it's anything that comes out of his mouth is going to be weird. So it's like, I feel comfortable in this shell. Still, it's a shell. So it's, you know, what kind of shells we're building. And these are the inquiries and the questions that as young men, having lived, you know, through school and college, university, through business and startups, and then the other end of that, now asking new questions. And perhaps these are the questions that ideally could be asked at a very early stage in life, right? It's not going to mean that we're not going to step through the bullshit, and we're still not going to go through the fire, because we will. However, the guidance may be slightly different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, perhaps not even asked, but just introduced somehow at a young age. Instead of asking, who do you want to be when you grow up? Just reframing that somehow to set up a young mind to ask the right questions from the get-go. And maybe in the future, people won't have to break. I think in the system we live in currently, there should be a point at which you break, at which you kind of break free of that molds that's been cast upon you, that you've been forced to fit in to please your parents and everybody around you, ending up living a life which namely focuses on how you're perceived by others, and you forget about how you perceive yourself. I think that's the biggest tragedy, when you get caught in that trap, because then are you really living your own life, or are you living the life that's kind of expected of you from others? And, yeah, I'm still figuring that one out. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks for your share, guys. Pablo, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Man, I'm like drinking mate here. I can keep this going.
Well, I have another call in 10 minutes.
Oh, man.
Okay.
I guess it's Thursday. We don't have shit to do in life, right? All right, Shandeep. There goes my purpose in life. This is made me realize I
cleared my whole calendar.
Oh, man. Thank you. Thank you, Rob, for your time. Thank you, Shandeep, for co-creating.
Thank you, brothers. It's a pleasure.
Hey, Rob, I think we can edit